to Voices of Experience, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. I'm your host, technology strategist and futurist Crystal Washington. In today's episode, Hierarchy of Virtual, we'll uncover how you can differentiate yourself from the competition and potentially increase your revenue per event by creating levels of service offerings. Are you ready? Let's get started. On today's segment of Voices of Experience, we have Andrew Tarvin, LOL. He's the world's first humor engineer. He combines his background in computer science and engineering with his experience as a stand-up and improv comedian. Very interesting fact about Andrew, he's given over 75 virtual events since March 1st. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Crystal.
So with you doing over 75 virtual events since March, I think it's amazing that you have a very unique perspective on our topic today, which is the hierarchy of events. And you've actually kind of created your own hierarchy of different levels of virtual experiences we can give. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I was talking to some clients as well as to some bureau contacts, and we realized that you can have a very different experience of what I maybe call a virtual keynote. Someone else, it's really kind of more like a traditional old school webinar, or what is kind of a live pre-recorded thing that's presented as kind of live is very different than just talking over slides, etc. So realize, at least for me, the engineer background is like, I want to create a taxonomy or organization so that we at least have an understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about these different type of virtual experiences.
Now, what I love about this is that sometimes our clients come to us knowing what they need right now in terms of virtual experiences. But Andrew, because this is so new to many, they don't even have the terminology. So it sounds like you're almost giving them this beautiful menu where they can kind of choose what level they're looking for.
Exactly. And that's part of it, because I think that, we're, like you said, we're so new into this space, and most people, when they think of virtual experiences, they think of the old school webinar. They think of either, that university professor who shares their screen and then just drones on and on and on over slides that they're reading to you. Or they think of the webinar model where people are selling you things, where it's like, that's a popular kind of sales, and nothing against that as a sales technique, where it's like the whole thing is you get people to come to your webinar, you talk for 45 minutes, you do a little bit of Q&A, and then you sell someone into your mastermind or group coaching or whatever. All of those perfectly suitable virtual experiences, but that's what people have in mind. And so I wanted to create a way to distinguish between something like that and no, this is meant to help to have an actual virtual keynote event. So if you're not having an in-person event, say, hey, you can still have a very compelling, very engaging, very value-driven presentation that is going to actually have an impact on your organization. And that's different than what you're used to seeing before.
So, I think one of our main goals for this episode, Andrew, is we're going to use your levels, use your hierarchy as an example. And everyone listening, they can take from this what they want. They might decide they need 3 levels or 4 levels. But with that in mind, how many levels do you have in your hierarchy?
I have 5. And because I'm an engineer, they start at base 0. So we start at 0 level accounting, right? Because that's what we do as engineers. Right. And also because tier 0 is kind of the worst of the worst that you think of. It is like, as I mentioned, it is someone just, going into Zoom, sharing their screen. They're doing the turtle, what I call the turtle, where like it's only showing the bottom or the top half of their head because the rest of it is just headroom above them. Or they're doing what I call the Batman, which is because they're only showing the bottom half of their face. They are backlit. They're using the built-in audio on their computer, the built-in video. There's clutter and everything in the background. You're distracted by like there's either a ton of people walking by or they've got closet doors open or what. It's just like that tier 0 experience. So that's kind of the stereotypical bad of what we're used to. So that's tier 0.
I'm hoping, so do you actually offer tier 0?
We do not. That's just more of a distinction to say tier 0 is what you're used to getting. We can go all the way up until 4. And now they start to see, oh, okay, now I at least understand that this is something different.
Okay, so you have it there so that they can, and actually I would imagine when it comes to them choosing between different speakers, it's going to open them up to ask the other ones that you might be in competition with some questions in terms of what their offerings are.
Exactly. Yeah, they might, and they may not use the language of, say, tier 0, but they might be like, okay, so I'm curious, when you set this up, what type of audio are you using, or what's kind of the background? And this is kind of an important kind of strategy thing, is for when you're doing virtual meetings with people to pitch yourself, you should be showcasing the tier that you will deliver in, or at least close to it. So don't have your virtual meetings with the tier 0 equivalent, which is just your laptop sitting on your computer. It's pointed upwards. Your nostrils are mostly kind of the biggest thing on screen, is just a kind of upward view of your nostrils, bad backlighting, etc. Even for something as simple as a quick call with a meeting planner, that's going to help them set the stage. That's going to position in their head what they're going to see for the webinar. Even if you're like, no, but I have a whole studio and I'm going to get into it. Well, actually show, don't just tell. And so that's an important thing to recognize, even so, not having tier 0 meetings almost in effect.
So if tier 15, and a magical, I know you have you have 5 tiers, but let's say tier 15, if I'm on a huge stage and there's fireworks and stuff, you're saying on my conference call, I need to be on the stage holding my mic with fireworks going off, and I'm like, okay, let's talk timing. Is that how that should work?
Maybe not that extreme, but at least maybe have video of it.
Okay.
Right? At least be, in your live call, be like, hey, I want to kind of demonstrate just very quickly. And this is an interesting thing. So part of where this came from of virtual is, one, being an engineer, loving computers, and 2, saying, okay, how do we take advantage of the virtual medium? Rather than trying to just replicate the in-person experience and say, hey, this is our best substitute, I hope it's okay. More of say, no, if this is going to be virtual, let's take advantage of it. And one of those advantages of virtual is video, is that, if you're at an in-person event and someone shows a video, I don't know if you're like me, but when I'm in the audience, I'm like, there better be a really good reason why you're showing a video and not just doing the same thing. Like if it's just a video to say you're cool, I don't want to see it. If it's a video clip of you being funny, it's like, just be funny in real life, because you go from a 3D person live to now a video screen that you have to watch. Versus in virtual, you can seamlessly go from talking and go into a video pre-recorded, and the experience for the end user is exactly the same. They're still watching a screen. They're still seeing it. So if you're on a virtual meeting, this is part of what kind of separates the tier 4, the highest level. But if you're in a meeting talking with someone, you can say, let me show you what we do for our virtual keynotes. And then you can kind of seamlessly go into that video. Now you could show some of the firework footage, etc. You don't necessarily have to set them off for that kind of tier 15, if that makes sense.
It does. Okay, so let's do just a very brief overview of the different tiers. So we understand tier 0, because we're doing engineering here. Tier 0 is pretty much the sucky tier, right?
Yep. It's like, you don't want to offer this. You don't want it to be an option for people to get. It's more of a way of saying, hey, I'm not tier 0. We're better than kind of that stereotypical bad that you're used to. Tier 1 is using all the same equipment. So using still built-in audio, built-in video, which we don't necessarily recommend. But if you're limited to just the built-in stuff, at least then elevating the computer so that it is eye level, so you're not seeing those nostril shots, changing the background so you're not backlit, cleaning up the background so you don't have clutter, making sure that you're talking to your significant other, or your kids or your pets or that kind of stuff, so that there's not a ton of background noise going on. So basically it's all of the basics of tier 0, but at least a professional looking level. And so again, you're using built-in video and built-in audio, but you're at least adding a little bit of basic lighting. You're maybe bringing in a lamp so that you are a little bit more lit and not backlit. The delivery is a little bit better. Maybe you're educating the users on how to change their experience so that it's not just you talking over slides. You are adding a little bit of interaction, taking advantage of chat or polling, etc. So the entire experience is a professional version of the built-in basic technology.
Okay. And then level 2.
Level two. Level two is elevating all of that just a little bit. So that is now bringing in a webcam, right? A USB webcam, something like a Logitech Brio or the C9030, if you can get your hands on it. I know a lot of those are out of stock. The audio is something that is a USB microphone. Maybe it's a Samsung Q2U or the Blue Yeti. You've got headphones in so that you don't have any type of echo. You maybe get a USB ring light or one of those clip-on ring light that's like $10 or something like that. So it's at least a little bit brighter. And you also, the delivery of it starts to change a little bit. Instead of just having you talking over slides, maybe for part of it, you stop sharing your screen so that it's a direct camera to you so that you do kind of engage and chat with the audience. And then maybe you go back into sharing your screen. You've got more of that interaction with Q&A and chat and things like that. So it's now it's not a ton of investment, maybe a small amount of investment, but it's a slight elevation of what you've done before.
Okay, and it sounds to me like this is probably the level where many of our peers, even with limited resources, can aim for there at least. Does that sound like an accurate?
It does. Yep, exactly. So that should be that's kind of at least kind of for most people, they can at least kind of get to tier 2, because tier 1's kind of like, okay, if I'm just going to do a webinar every now and then, I can get away with that. Tier 2 is like, yeah, if you want to start to maybe lead a virtual workshop or you want to kind of elevate the status of it, start to look towards tier 2 and what you can.
Okay, so let's talk about tier 3, because we have some overachievers listening. We got to make our way up the list.
Yeah, tier 3 is where it starts to get really exciting. And this is where it starts to turn more into that virtual keynote experience where you're differentiating yourself from before. You're saying this is actually something that is produced and that I'm invested in, right? Partially you investing in equipment says, hey, this wasn't a virtual event that I just decided to do once and I'm claiming I can do it. But no, this I do enough to justify having additional equipment. And so that is using things like cameras connected via HDMI. So maybe it's a DSLR, maybe it is a PTZ camera, maybe it's an actual video camera connected to HDMI. You can then bring it in either through a hardware switcher. So the A10 Mini Pro is a popular one, or you can use software switchers like OBS or Wirecast. But with that, you're going to have seamless integration of slides. So rather than, hey, wait a second, let me share my screen. Now that's going to change and it's all small for you, etc. It's like, nope, I press a button or I do a shortcut and now I'm immediately into slides. This also might be when you're introducing picture-in-picture, which there's multiple ways to do that picture-in-picture view, but that's where you're talking and then the slides are small next to you kind of in the corner. So the visual experience is very different. The audio is elevated. It's still maybe a Blue Yeti, or maybe you're going with the Rode lavalier microphone so that it's actually like closer to you and just you kind of talking. Lighting, you've maybe picked up a 3-point lighting system off of Amazon, so you're very well lit. If you are having a virtual background, it's a good professional virtual background with maybe the client's logo in it, or you at least have a clean background that you're using. And again, like I said, then you're using picture-in-picture. You have the talking headshot, but then you also have maybe a secondary camera angle. Q&A, chat, polls. All the settings for breakout rooms. How to share a whiteboard. The advanced features, and it's all kind of seamless throughout.
Okay. Level 3 sounds pretty fun. Now, I'm really curious about level 4, because on level 3, we had switchers, we had Rhodes mics, so we had backgrounds with our clients' images on them. So what's level 4?
Yeah, so level 4, and this is a great point, because I don't think that everyone needs to, not everyone has to shoot for tier 4, right? Because this is basically a TV produced program is what it feels like. Okay. And this is, if you've seen any of the work that Vin Jiang or Dan Thurman or Drew Davis of what they've done, they're at this kind of like level 4 experience where they have multiple camera angles. They might even have someone on site switching for them. So maybe a family member, or they have a virtual producer that's come in and can switch for them so they don't have to be the one that's doing it. They are maybe seamlessly going in and out of video. This is something that Drew Davis does really well, where he'll be like, hold on just a moment, and he'll step off the screen and then it will start right into a video. And for a split second, the audience is like, wait, are we outside now? Is this a live thing where we're outside? And then you realize, oh no, it's just that he's wearing the same thing and his pre-recorded video. So now that it feels like this complete experience. Some groups even of that group, they might even go into a completely different scene. So they might walk off camera, switch to a different camera, and they go into a light board session, or they go into a different room so Dan Thurman can kind of do some of his juggling or some of the other like physical things that he does. And so it feels very much like a produced TV show. And that's kind of even at that then highest level, I think, of kind of what some people are doing. All of the equipment that they're using, it's very high end. So maybe instead of the ATEM Mini Pro, they might be using the ATEM Television Studio Pro, which is like a $3,000 piece of equipment. They might be using lavalier systems, multiple microphones. They might have a 5-point lighting system, right? It's all elevated to this kind of much higher level. And again, not everyone has to shoot for that. I think you can have a great virtual keynote experience. It's very different for a lot of people at tier 3. I think you can sit in the middle between tier 2 to tier 3 and still deliver a great program without a huge amount of investment, but learning the tools very well. But that's at least the range of experience. And now the client can at least say, oh, okay, well, we at least know for sure we don't want tier 0 or tier 1. What can you do to kind of elevate the experience for our audience?
Wow. And what's powerful about this is that we're now in a time where we're in different locations, but many of our locations have opened up enough where we can get to studios and things. So even if someone wanted to offer a tier 4 but doesn't have all the equipment at home, there are places we can go to still do that for clients that are willing to make that level of investment.
Absolutely. And even with social distancing rules, a lot of those studios are doing a great job of setting it up where it's like you can come in and you're never closer than 6 feet from each other because they can do all their production from far enough back. They have the camera angles. You just go onto the stage or you go onto their studio sound stage of where you're going to do the recording. So you're exactly right. You can deliver that experience without necessarily investing in all of the equipment.
So speaking of investments, okay, and on Voices of Experience, because we're part of National Speakers Association, Andrew, you already know this, we don't talk specific pricing, but what I like to do is talk pineapples. Yep. So let's look at these different levels. So let's say level 1, because again, level 0's level sucks, so we don't ever want to be there. At level 1, if we charge 10 pineapples, do we charge 10 pineapples for all the levels? Or what are your suggestions on how we approach pricing?
Yeah, I think with the elevated experience comes an elevation in pineapples for sure. Like, I think that, yeah, if you're recognizing, because it's also for different, like I would not do level 4 for a 10-person workshop that I'm leading because I think it's too much. It would be like delivering a 10-person in-person workshop, but coming out on the stage with the fireworks, etc.
Yeah, you look like a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, this is too extreme because there is still tremendous value for some experiences. I know some speakers, right? Phil Jones talked about this in his influence session of like, yes, some people are doing the big stage, multiple camera angles, etc. But for some people, it's like, no, I want to get 50 people into a room and have a sit down, heart to heart conversation. Right. Now that's still going to be a tier 2 to tier 3 level, right? He's still using external audio. He's still like, there's still good lighting, etc. You still want it to be a professional experience, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. So I think it's proportionate to the size of event is also going to relate to, the number of pineapples and the equipment that you're going to use.
Very good. Well, Drew, I want to be really respectful of your time, and you have given us so much to think about in terms of how we can start to offer different tiers to our clients and really investigate how we can best service them. Is there anything that you'd want to leave our listeners with as a last thought as they start to develop their own tiers?
Sure. I think, certainly whether you don't necessarily need to have every single component of each tier to get there. It's just more of a way to start thinking about things a little bit differently. From talking with clients, some of the things that really kind of differentiate you from that traditional webinar is really good audio. So making sure that you have a good audio system and that you hear it and you don't have too much background noise. Really good lighting as a starting point. Video quality almost matters a little bit less because you're going to have bandwidth issues for some groups anyway, but that, still having good video and framing. And picture-in-picture is one of the quickest ways to differentiate yourself from other groups. And that can come from something like a hardware switcher like an ATEM Mini Pro, or I'll give you a great secret for people to check out is Prezi Video.
Yes.
Prezi Video is one of the quickest, easiest ways to create picture-in-picture, and that seemingly still blows people's mind. So right now it's blowing people's mind to see it. Very soon it's going to be the base level that you need to hit if you want to be seen in that top tier as a virtual presenter.
What if I told you that Andrew was kind enough to offer NSA members a handout on crafting a virtual hierarchy? Just head on over to nsaspeaker.org/VOE podcast and click on the Members Resources link. Thank you for tuning into Voices of Experience, the podcast of the National Speakers Association. Catch us on your favorite podcast app, YouTube, and NSA's social media profiles. You do not want to miss next week's episode. I'll see you then.